This episode of the Kill by Kill podcast is brought to you in part by the twisted, spine-tingling thriller Disquiet, now streaming on Redbox. Jonathan Rhys-Meyers stars as a patient who wakes up to discover he's trapped in an abandoned hospital by mysterious and sinister forces that have no intention of letting him leave. Don't miss out on this must-see movie. Stream Disquiet instantly on Redbox On Demand today, rated R from Paramount Pictures. And as a special gift to our listeners, I have 5 digital passes to watch Disquiet on Redbox On Demand. Just email me at killbykillpod@gmail.com with Disquiet in the subject box, and you could receive a free chance to watch it today. And now, the body count continues. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, dying times here. That's right, we're talking about Bones and All on Kill by Kill. Well, greetings and salutations, Internet. It's your old pal, Patrick Hamilton, coming to you once again from the road between Missouri and Michigan. This is the Kill by Kill podcast, where we're dedicated to celebrating the least discussed component of any horror film, the characters. We're going to unpack all the goriest of details of 2022's Bones and All, in hopes that a young eater's untimely end is just the beginning of the jokes we might make at their expense. And as always, there's only one person I trust to give me the rules of who we eat and who we don't. The one, the only, Gina Radcliffe. How are you doing today, Gina?
I was trying to come up with a funny little rhyme, and the best I could do was it's never sad with rad. But I've got my overalls on. I'm filthy. I'm ready to talk about this movie.
Filth is an important component of this. We have had some filthy movies as of late, and this one really tops the list. I mean, every surface is grimy. Every hand has gone unwashed for far too long. You suggested that we usually we tend to pick movies that we that are a little on the we can make fun of it scale. I'm not entirely like, I'm sure there's some goof 'em ups here of Bones and All. Let's not take it too seriously, but there is lots to dig into about it. So if not, because not everyone might have had the chance to check out Bones and All, why don't we have a quick spoiler-free section, as it were, of your impressions of this motion picture?
Well, I watched it at the end of the year as part of a being assigned to do a Best of 2022 article for the Spool, the outlet I write for. I had planned on seeing it in the theater. The problem was it stayed in the theater about a week because this movie was done dirty by its studio. It was released at the wrong time of the year. It was released after Thanksgiving, I think. When
everyone wants to see a cannibal love story.
Yeah, while it's like I said, some of the listeners may argue, is this really a horror movie? Which I say, yes, but it's maybe not a scary horror movie. It's a movie with horror elements, but I still think it would have been a much better fit for the Halloween season. Or maybe in the winter of 2022. I feel like they did not know either what to do with this movie or how to market this movie, and they just sort of unceremoniously dropped it in the theater right before all the Oscar bait season movies came out, and it basically just tanked at the box office.
Part of the issue here is that it also fell into a glut at the box office, which is weird to say, considering how few movies are released in comparison to how many movies used to be released in the before times. But you had this insane glut of horror and horror tangential related content all around the same time. And it was all very high profile. And it was all these small movies doing big business. And they were all different kinds of things. So you would think there would be enough room at the table for it. But I think it just got swallowed by too many other stories, too many other things that it would have to compete with. And like you said, they just didn't know how to tell people what kind of movie this is.
Right. Because I think a lot of people went in to it expecting something different than what they got.
Mm-hmm.
And
yes,
I saw this movie and, I thought this was a really good movie. And then it's really just kind of been one of those movies that just like has stuck with me and has really kind of grown in esteem over time since I saw it back in December. And now I'm like constantly recommending it to people like, did you see Bones and All? You should see Bones and All. You really need to see Bones and All. I become an evangelist for this teen cannibal romance.
Which is based on a YA novel, which I find truly wild. It doesn't quite feel as saccharine as that. Or at least how certainly the audience for the YA group would not run out in droves to see this, regardless of the amount of Timothée Chalamet content you have, which is a shame because I think Taylor Russell's lead performance, and far and away, she is the lead of this motion picture.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
And she is fan-fucking-tastic in this film, which is not a particularly showy performance, but if she does not land you in this, you have zero hope for actually catching on.
Right. But it's also shored up by two absolutely bizarre and wonderful performances by two of among my favorite character actors who are just coming in and like, well, I'm going to tear off a chunk of this scenery and a chunk of that scenery. And I'm going to gather this scenery up, put it in my little bag and walk off the screen with it. Like, I don't know the book. Yeah. So I don't know if Mark Rylance, if the choices he made with his character are, well, we should also say this for the spoiler talk.
Let's but overall it's a movie that is stuck with you.
Yes.
And I think you've said over and over again, we should talk about this movie. We should talk about this movie. We should talk about this movie.
Yeah. I just think it's a very, different take on this sort of genre in that it's oddly very sweet. And very touching, and you find yourself like, I want things to work out for these crazy kids, even though they have to eat people to survive.
Yes, yes, and I think one note is, despite its sweetness, it does not hold back on the gore element of it. So if gore is something that you cannot handle, particularly human gore, this probably isn't for you, or at least you should be warned going into it that there are many sweet moments, but there are also a lot of teeth gnashing into human bodies.
Yes.
So you gotta, but it doesn't shy away from the repercussions of that. I think one of the revelations for me, because my estimation of what this might be going into it was more of a near dark, and coming out of it, I'm like, oh, no. This is Badlands. This is Terrence Malick's Badlands, but instead of one a-hole who you happen to fall in love with, who just ruins your existence, despite how much you love him because he's so fucking dreamy, it is actually, that person is a rather stabilizing force. You're more alike than you are different. And it is simply that the world is not built to handle you. And as a result, there is a very forlorn, beautiful motion picture. It's just photographed so lovingly. The performances are fantastic. I think this is something that is much more worth people's time and effort than it is being projected as. I think this is being sort of pushed out there as you went up to the plate and you swung and you missed. And I believe that the film actually connects.
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah, it's ended up being one of my favorite movies of last year. And last year was there was a lot of heavy hitters and home runs last year.
Yes,
and this is one of them for me.
Year.
It was a good movie year. And anybody that says differently is just being a contrarian.
Yes, or they have limited their ability, what movies they see, or they have I only view film as this category, and then you dismiss everything else. And I think across the board there was a lot of really good stuff. And stuff that I revisit, not to go off topic here, but I revisited Scream 5 and I'm like, holy shit, this is better the second time than the first time. And I really liked it the first time, but I think it's actually even better than I remembered it. It is actually very, very well constructed and I think very well performed. Now, what people are asked to do is nothing on the level of the tightrope walk that is on display by multiple people in this motion picture. It's just a difficult set of circumstances, but it is so beautiful to look at that you can't turn away. And I think those central performances and really everyone on the periphery, the satellites that go around these two planets are really, really well performed.
I'm so glad you liked it.
Well, that then brings us to the spoiler-filled portion. So if you have not seen Bones and All, and you wish to remain spoiler-free, this would be your chance to pause the podcast or delete it and then re-download it again and just keep downloading it over and over and over again for no particular reason other than it helps us. And so with that being said, let's now go to spoilers. Before we get to every other performance here, there's one that I would really like to highlight, and that is Andre Holland as Frank Yearly, Marin's dad, why is this man not the biggest motherfucking movie star in the goddamn world? Why am I still waiting for him to constantly be the lead in things or just be in every movie as that guy? Whatever it takes. Please put this man in more fucking movies. He's so fucking good.
Yeah, I one of my favorite movies from the past 10 years is Moonlight.
Mm-hmm.
And I often find myself just being in the mood to watch the ending.
Yeah.
And because it's such a subtle yet so deeply moving ending about about love and acceptance and how, this friend who, the main character shared a very intimate moment with, many years ago, is still the same person he was back then. And just, the only place that feels good and familiar to him. And that's Andre Holland.
Yeah.
And you got a lot of this movie. Moonlight employs a lot of very tight close-ups of the actors.
Mm-hmm.
And in this whole scene, he's just looking at the main character with just, complete, love in his eyes, just and it's just, you just feel it's like you putting a blanket around you. It's like, this guy's going to be okay. It's like he's found someone who accept him for who he is and, let him be who he wants to be. And it's just such a, it's such a meaningful scene. And yeah, he's just been bubbling under for so long. And
mm-hmm.
And in this movie, he does what seems to be the unthinkable. She's not a child at this point. She's like 18.
Right. Yeah.
But she doesn't have anybody else in the world but him. And he basically abandons her because he just doesn't know what to do with her anymore. And it's a heartbreaking decision.
He cannot take it. But he's also, you can tell, he is he's made a decision probably a while ago that this is what he's going to do. But he's also like, I'm going to try to prepare this person so that when I do exit the picture, she's not truly left to the wolves. And he does that, but you can tell there's a lot of heartbreak in what's going on. And when there's that flashback scene to the two of them in that Friendly's like ice cream parlor, and he's like, wow, your 18th birthday. I've waited for this day for a long time. And it has a lot of meaning to it.
Yeah.
Because it's not just my little girl has grown up. It's this is the day at which I exit this picture, to the point where I've held back on paying the bills. The electricity will go off in mere minutes after I leave.
Right. Kind of forcing her. He's forcing her out of the nest, like literally.
Because he can't contain that nest any longer. And so this is where it weirdly combines with a lot of, again, other films that we've seen. Badlands has been mentioned. But this would also go back to Let the Right One In sort of vibes, where he has...
Another favorite of mine.
Truly, it is a fantastic, icy motion picture that is... that has a lot of emotion, but the presentation is so devoid of it. It's a very putting your hands up to you to kind of keep you at a distance sort of feel for a purpose. Here, I feel like we're constantly invited into these people's spaces. We're constantly being put in Marin's place to feel how she feels. You know, these people could be presented as one type of thing. And I don't think we ever really get one type of thing until Michael Stuhlbarg and, believe it or not, David Gordon Green entered the picture for the tensest 7 minutes you're going to feel in this film. That's for damn sure.
Yeah, you were talking about Andre Holland, and you know, he did definitely, his performance is up there. But for me, honestly, the key character in this movie is Mark fucking Rylance.
Sure.
I
Who
don't
is
know
Mark Rylancing it up to 11? Like, he is doing a lot of his tricks, but I feel like most actors would have been going MOON spells moon levels of characterization here. And if you know, you know. And he doesn't. He is delivering the Rose the Hat, psychic vampire type of performance that really benefits this motion picture, because you don't know exactly what his deal is, even right up until the end. I still don't know exactly what his deal is.
Yeah, I was going to mention this earlier. I've not read the book, so I don't know if the choices that were made for this character are choices that he made or are they in canon. But the one thing I noticed, I mentioned this on Twitter, like after I saw the movie, is that he puts on a voice that kind of reminds me of whenever the We Hate Movies guys impersonate M. Emmett Walsh. Yeah, it's like, never Dolly was solid. This kind of weird sort of kind of like high register, sort of vaguely Southern accent. And he's got this like long braid and like a hat with a feather in it, and like this sort of almost like an indigenous outfit, kind of like, and he carries around like one of the most spooky aspects is that he has a bag that has this like long braid. I mean, he wears a braid, but he also carries around a braid that has pieces of the hair of every single person he's eaten. And like as soon as you say, it's like, okay, now it's a horror movie.
Right.
You know, he kind of maybe wants to have sex with her, but kind of maybe wants to be a father figure to her. And, you know, but kind of also maybe just wants to be partners with her. It's, you know, kind of, there's a whole bunch of these weird elements to their relationship.
Yes. And it should be noted, and one thing I didn't know, and I think is interesting in the sense that it's a little supernatural and it's a lot not. The most supernatural element is that they can smell one another. They can smell people around them. They can smell where other eaters are. Sully is much better at it than other people. Marin, the least of which she's gaining those powers, and Sully even is the first person to introduce to her that there are other people out there who are also eaters. But everything else is like, you think, I need to eat, but then after I eat, like I'm invulnerable. No,
it's never actually explained. Like, is it like all we know is that apparently it's genetic, because her mother, as we find out, has whatever this affliction is, to the point where she has eaten her own hands, which is again like,
who amongst us?
This is a horror movie. I'm not sure how you can. It's only because it's subtle at it that people may be quick to dismiss it.
Yes, when finger licking good goes too far is what Chloe Sevigny is delivering in a truly frightening wig, a haircut, which I'm trying to describe this to the audience at home, and I'm not entirely sure exactly what it is. It's a very close cropped Pam Grier.
I assume it's just a standard like institutional haircut, so that they don't have to worry about spending too much time on combing her hair. Obviously, she's not going to be able to do it.
She won't be fulfilling those duties anytime soon.
But what's interesting about her character and Mark Rylance and Michael Stuhlbarg's character is that they're all at least a generation older than Marin and Lee, Timothy Chalamet's characters, and none of them are well. They're not like normal people. Like they've either given up or lost the ability to even maintain the image of being a normal person. Like Michael Stuhlbarg is like a hillbilly living off the land. With David Gordon Green's character, who we discover has just decided to be a cannibal. He doesn't even have
he's into it.
Yeah, he doesn't even have whatever this like physical innate urge to eat people. He just likes doing it.
Yeah, no, this is what he's been looking for his entire life. Like he was just going to be a serial killer, and he's like, well, I can pal around with somebody and I can do the grossest thing possible and I'm not looked down upon. Well, I just got to join up. This is a tribe I got to join.
Whereas Marin and Lee, they crave normalcy. And for a while, Marin has that. She's able to go to school. Granted, she does have to move around a lot because eventually she does give in to these urges. But she does want to maintain some semblance of normalcy, whereas all of the older eaters, it's just they can't or they won't anymore.
And her desire throughout most of the film is to try to find a way to ethically do this because she can't control it. She knows she's going to. There's no way out. But is there a way to do this that does not cost her soul? And Sully's the first person who kind of introduces her to the idea of, listen, I don't go out of my way to kill people. I can smell when someone's kind of on the edge of expiring. And as they fade out, it's dinner time. And so I'm not really on purpose doing terrible things. They were going to die, and I'm taking advantage of their timing. The fact that he can smell people, half a mile away who are doing this, bully for him. It doesn't make it any less gross, but he's sort of proposing that if Marin is going to do this with, in a sense, maybe he should or she should, adopt this philosophy. And yes, is this because he's finally found another eater who won't try to immediately stab him in the back? That's the initial feeling I get. And I think it just gets wrapped up in the prospect of, I found somebody I could speak to who didn't immediately want to kill me, but also is not into my presentation at all, is still freaked out. They don't like it. And how do you react to that? Which is like, I can't even have this other person who is as condemned, as it were, to this affliction as I am. Like, even she rejects me. And I think that just spins him off into a different universe.
Right. He, I think he, like I said, I think there's a lot of strong feelings coming from him towards her. Most of them not good.
No.
And not, not to her benefit. I think that, Sully, your primary issue is, you could use a makeover. The kids aren't into the hippie braid.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, he, his whole persona is just, he kind of comes off a little bit frankly, like a bit of a child molester. And right. I don't blame anybody for, being, automatically repelled by him. And, his heel turn in it is, while expected, also still kind of terrifying.
Because he presents as such a gentle soul. Like, he's gone out of his way to do this thing in the most gentle, non-invasive, non-predatory way possible. But he also cannot relate to other people. He's just isolated himself to the point where he's kind of cuckoo bananas for Cocoa Puffs Town. Whereas Michael Stuhlbarg revels in it. He is the worst version of this, and Lee can kind of smell it on him from a mile away. Like, listen, we got to placate these people, but the first chance we get to just get the fuck out of Dodge and put miles between us and them, we do it. There's just no good can come of this. And then Chloe Sevigny is just, she ate her own arms.
Yeah, I mean, she's just like, she's just completely gone. There's this, she's beyond loss of humanity.
Now, there's many ways one can take this. And I think is, in terms of its overall theme, obviously it cannot be understated that they have chosen specifically to place this in the 80s for a multitude of reasons. One, it's just easier to conceive of the ability to exist without record in the 80s.
Right.
You don't have cell phones. We see one computer in a bus station that's as technological as this motion picture gets. It allows them to travel freely, and the idea that you could probably walk away from a grisly murder without, CSI instantly being on you. How the society exists currently, that would be very difficult for them. But because you place it in that particular circumstance, it allows you to view it through a lot of different critical lenses. And the one that jumps out to me almost immediately, and it doesn't really make a lot of, it's not holding this back at all. But obviously there's a queer theory examination in this, in that Marin, in the first instance we see, is almost in a seduction pose with this friend from school right up until the point she bites this girl's finger off.
Oh yeah, they look like they're about they look like they're about to kiss, and then she chops down her finger.
Lee is again not above seduction, and Marin does not I thought this was romantic. They are pan romantic sort of thing where their relationship is their relationship, but she also understands the almost seductive relationship you have with your ultimate victim. And so when she spies Lee having sex with this carny, who, they've said, we're going to eat somebody, let's choose this person, she doesn't blanch at all. And then you set it within an 80s in which you hear preachers on the radio condemning queer folk, and Ronald Reagan, who famously knew of the existence of AIDS, did nothing about it on purpose, in the hopes that it would essentially kill off queer people in an accelerated rate. this really does come across as a queer experience of being just, all right, you're on your own. And whatever you're doing, the society goes, you're going to be harming people. And the people you come in contact who even might be queer like you will not always have the best of intentions. It's very, very rich in a numerous amount of ways.
Yeah, I had a very silly moment where I didn't realize initially, because it's sort of, it doesn't announce itself as being, a takes place in the 80s movie.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that perhaps that Timothée Chalamet's dyed hair and torn up jeans are a little more contemporary than 80s, but that's neither here nor there. But I saw that Marin's birth date was on a piece of paper, and I was like, oh, she's my age.
You're right. Yeah. Well, first I'm like, is she using her mom's birth certificate? I'm like, no. That is her. Okay, we're in a specific time frame. Okay, they're not just poor where they don't have cell phones. They're poor in the 80s. She's 18. This is 1988.
Yeah, and you mentioned them being poor. Another thing that I appreciate is, even though this took place, predominantly in the South and Midwest, it really drove home to me how every little, scrub little town looks the same. Like the town where Lee grew up and where his sister still lives looks a lot like the town I went to high school in. And, their little crappy house looked like the little crappy house I lived in. And it's so, and I don't think the audience is supposed to, mock or look down on these characters, but
no,
it's so, it's a way of living that is, so rarely depicted in movies that it's still a little bit of a shock to me to see it. Or if it is depicted, it is in a way that the audience is supposed to feel kind of disgusted or repelled by it. And I don't think you're supposed to here. I think it's just these two small town kids that have found each other, and they happen to have in common this weird thing that makes them eat people.
And there's an element to this that is very bad, not to return to Terrence Malick's Badlands over and over.
That's obviously an influence, though.
But their refuge and the place where the film is at its most beautiful are these extended vistas that they find themselves in, where they're very small amongst a large panoramic view. And that is where the beauty is. The domiciles and where people congregate, it doesn't matter what state they're in. They're all in the same kind of disrepair. It's almost as if the world is slowly decaying around them, and there is little for them to do. Why would you stay if everywhere you go is this? And it's almost to the point where both Marin and Lee are used to this because they have been raised by people who have tried to keep them on the margins so they are never noticed. If you're in the middle of a big city or a suburban center and this is happening to you, a lot more people are going to find out about it. And there's a purpose and a design to this type of life. And the beauty that they find is just beyond those grasses, when they find a little bit of freedom outside of the set pathway they have in their future set out for them. And it really resonated. It's just very, very gorgeous. As far as Timothée Chalamet, not exactly fitting into the 80s. I feel the same way about him in Little Women. He looks great on screen. He also describes himself as 140 pounds, and he looks it. And he just is so modern. It's very hard to place him in the past. Some people can easily just slip into the past. He is not amongst them.
But at the same time, I think it kind of works too, because they both sort of drift unnoticed and yet stand out at the same time.
Mm-hmm. And I do love that they do not shy away from the repercussions of their behavior. The entire dilemma that Marin has is to How can I exist like this? There's elements of this that I cannot just shove away. It's either find a way to exist and cause as little harm as possible, or essentially follow in the path of older generations who are either skeevy, crazy, or institutionalized. Those are alternatives. And so you really feel for her, as what she wants is what we all want. The freedom and ability to just exist and have wants and dreams. And those wants and dreams might not be to, I don't know, be the lead ballerina in New York City. She simply would like to exist in a place where she could work at a bookshop and maybe, once every 3 months slip out of town and eat somebody so she can stay alive.
I mean, it doesn't seem like a bad life.
That is the sort of other element of this for me that I wondered, and I don't know that it necessarily bears out, but there's some way to look at Bones and All as the feeling we all have, and that has it in common with us, in which our continued existence and any level of comfort requires the discomfort and exploitation of other people's bodily autonomy. And how can you possibly be okay with that? And it is a very interesting and haunting question that I think about a lot, and there are no good answers for, which puts it into bummer of the year contention. That doesn't mean that art shouldn't confront these things and make me think about it, because I do end up returning, like Us, the Peele movie that I most identify with. It is because it asks a very uncomfortable question that there are zero easy answers to, and I am haunted by that. And then I get the thrill of, in Us, also the thriller horror movie that's happening, and in Bones and All, I get this beautiful romantic connection movie with these two kids who you just want to see make it, and over the course of the film, they're both attracted to each other, but then open up to one another emotionally instead of running away. They both make conscious decisions not to run away. And that, I think, is very resonant and what I think I'll think about more often than just chompy blood comes out of a chest.
Yeah, we didn't mention that this was directed by Luca Guadagnino, who boy, do I hope that he's able to keep making movies, because his last couple movies have not done well. He did this. He did Suspiria, which is another movie I love a lot, that basically did not make a dent at the box office and has its very loud detractors.
But I don't think it was given the opportunity to. It was essentially put in theaters for a week and a half, and then it's on Amazon. And of course they didn't advertise it was on Amazon.
It's the same thing with Bones and All. It's like, sure, go ahead and make that movie. And then well, how are we going to sell this movie? Well, oh well.
Yes, I think the world he's uninterested in making instantly pop culture feel good movies. I think he's very talented at what he does. He obviously has an eye, and all the talent in the world is desperate to work with him. Where I think and he's existing in a zone where you have to wonder what Bones and All's clearance is to make it worthwhile financially, necessarily. But also, I think it's fumbled. They fumbled the bag on this motion picture. And to be clear, am unsure exactly how you market this thing.
Yeah, you have to be clear to people that it is a horror movie with romantic elements. I would say more than romantic elements. It's the romance is the predominant aspect of the movie.
Yes.
but you also have to sell it as a romance with horror elements. And, unfortunately, somehow, for some reason, and I'm not even being funny, I don't understand it. Those audiences don't often overlap, which is very strange to me, because if you give me a movie that combines elements of horror and romance, I am probably going to love it. Like, I will give you another example of a movie that, while not necessarily similar in theme, but you'll also combine horror and romance, and flopped miserably at the box office, was Crimson Peak, which is a movie I very near and dear to my heart. But for some reason, it is appealing to an audience that does not actually have a enough overlap to make these popular movies at the box office. They usually don't find their audience until they're on streaming or cable, and people finally get an idea. Okay, what is this movie about? What happens in it? It's usually word of mouth that ends up promoting them.
And then I feel like Suspiria has kind of is finally now reached the level where people are beyond the initial, okay, this obviously isn't like the original, which
right.
Why would you try to, like, there are a ton of similarities. At some point, maybe we should do the original and the remake. And to call it a remake is kind of weird, but they're playing with all the same things. But do them back to back, almost in a sense, to explore what actually is similar about them and how they're using those similar elements to completely different ends. It's not easy to compare the two, and yet they have so many elements in common. It's a really rare gift to make something as cinematically equal to the original Suspiria. And his response is, that's not necessarily my goal. I would like to take these themes in a different direction and present it in my own way, and not worry about giving you a constant Technicolor nightmare. I'll give you a different nightmare using the same elements. And I think it's very winning. And over the course of time, people have softened on the need to directly compare the two films and allow this newer Suspiria to be its own thing and enjoy what it does individually so well.
And I am certain that Bones and All will find its audience. I hope it does, because I think it's an absolutely lovely movie that's a very unique take on the genre that basically says, yes, these people they're monsters. But, they what if you're a monster who doesn't mean or want to hurt people, but you have to?
Yeah. Or there's the one guy on Twitter when someone said Frankenstein is not really about like a man making a monster. Like, it's the monster in this is he's kind of innocent. Frankenstein's monster innocent. Like, he's kind of designed badly.
Yeah.
So if he ends up rampaging, is it really his fault or the person who made him that fault? And someone will go, well, as soon as he starts throwing girls into ponds, he's dead to me. And it's like, come on, y'all. What are we even doing here?
In the movie, he has the mind of a child. In the book, of course, he's actually very smart, but still doesn't know how to, act like a normal human being, because he's not a normal human being. Whereas in Bones and All, Sully, now, of course, he's kind of lying about that, he only eats people who are close to dying, because, spoiler, he ends up killing Lee's sister, because he's angry that, he perceives that Lee has quote unquote taken Marin away from him, which, he didn't. I mean, Lee is a kid her age.
Marin was not his to begin with.
Why would she, want to stick with Sully when she could be around people her own age? So obviously, I don't believe that Lee's sister is the first person that he killed because out of anger or out of to hurt someone else. I don't believe that for a second. I think he's probably lying about only choosing people who are sick or about to die. But when he was there with Marin, when they do a feed, they feed on an old lady who I guess she's having a heart attack or something.
Yeah.
Like she's actively dying when they find her, and like Sully just kind of dives right in his underwear, which is hilarious. I love that he thinks to strip down.
Well, that is my big question, Gina, is if you are an eater and you are constantly digging face first into bodies, you really need to have a lot of backup clothes.
Yeah.
Sully's kind of like, well, maybe I should change out of this. It's like, you think maybe you should change out of that? Like, how do you not have suitcases and suitcases of clothes at this point? You can't possibly, like, I think maybe just going in naked would, but I mean, maybe you can't necessarily do that for a movie and still get an R, but that would be my main thing, is like, the fewer clothes, the better when you're eating recently deceased people.
Yeah. And he just dives right in, and like Marin is kind of just struck by, that this is a person, this is, I mean, yeah, fine. They didn't kill her, but, and Sully's attitude is like, well, they're dying, so it doesn't matter anymore. But, she was a person who had a life, and to go to the scene where Lee picks up a carny and has sex with him to basically kind of, catch him off guard. She's less upset about catching him having sex with a man than she is about the fact that the guy had a wife and a kid. He was a person. This was, a real actual person that they have eaten. And, she's not gotten to the point yet where they're just food to her.
This is where it kind of coalesces back into its pseudo relationship with Near Dark, another movie I really initially was like, oh, I don't know how I feel about that. And every time I revisit it, I'm like, oh, I like this movie more and more and more and more. And in that film, the vampirism is in no way, shape, or form seductive. Like, there's nothing about that form of vampirism that's like, you're living glamorous, baby. This is truly a hard fucking life to rip people apart in the desert and stay out of the sun.
You're stuck in a trailer with a bunch of people you clearly hate.
That are terrible. A multi-generational family of terrible people. And, you have this young couple who's kind of like, maybe love is our way out. And then the rest of the family's like, fuck that. You're ours. We're all terrible together. You're either terrible or you're living in the sun, baby. There's no two ways about it. And I thought, based on initial impression, that this might be more like that somehow Marin is seduced into this, as opposed to the reality of the movie, in which he is quite literally born to do this as a quirk of her genetics. And so that was a welcome twist to what I assumed would be one kind of movie, which I think might be part of the reason why its fame was fleeting at a box office, whereas more simple fare of smile demon makes you go crazy, that earns over 100 million at the box office. A tale of a chef who has a cult that is going to kill his last group of diners, that makes almost $100 million. This is not quite that simple sell.
And that's why you have to, listen to other people and say, here's what it's actually about.
Yeah.
And this is why you should watch it.
Yes. Anything else that we haven't covered yet about Bones and All that you want to dig into face first?
Well, let me get down to my underwear. Hold on.
Okay. All right. We'll press pause. And stripping to, as of course, everyone, longtime listeners will know, I do this podcast every week in the nude. So
he's ready.
He's
ready. He's ready for the deep dive.
Mm-hmm. Every week.
Nude's probably better than like Sully's like little tighty whities.
Oh God, it's a really depressing outfit. It really is.
He might as well just be wearing long johns or something.
It is, those Y front tidy whities plus the sort of the sleeveless tee, it just and blood covered. And then when she goes, listen, I don't. First of all, I'm with somebody else. Secondly, I don't trust you. And he's like, I dried off near you. I never do that. Okay.
And then
he
he drops the C, and then we know, okay, that's his heel turn.
Oh, yeah, boy, yeah, boy. Obviously, for me, it's a big recommend. And quite obviously for you, it's a big recommend. Go and see this movie. It is rentable. It is ownable. Eventually, I'm sure it'll be on some streaming service, but don't let that really stop you from. This is well worth the rent, people, if not the own.
Yeah, and if you're like, our age, and you're like, who wants to watch some love story about teenagers? It's not quite that. It's much different from that. I think it's, like I said, I think it's a very oddly sweet movie at times. And, I actually found myself a little emotional about the ending. I don't want to give away the ending, but I just, it feels like, this is the only way it could happen. And yet it's like, oh, I wanted things to be better for these kids.
In essence, the people we think people are ultimately end up being right, which I think is a very fulfilling, tragic, resolution to the motion picture. It's just really well done, and it's gorgeous to look at. The music is fantastic.
Oh yeah, the music.
It's
Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross. So it's going to be good. But
yes.
I have been playing nonstop. One of the tracks was called "You Made It Feel Like Home," and I've gotten very emotional listening to that song quite a few times in recent weeks.
It's one of those things that's it's just not going. I think it's going to. It's not always going to sit right with the horror audience necessarily, because again, horror is a genre that can fit in all these other genres. And I think this one is much more of a character piece and a romance. And then horror is this element that's through it. But it is not horror forward, as it were, if we were to put it into wine terms.
But they do also rip out someone's, is that his stomach, his kidneys? They rip something out.
It's a vital organ.
Yeah,
it's something that dude needs.
Yeah,
and he doesn't have it inside his body.
No,
anymore,
they are one of them holding it in his hand, holding in their hands.
It is bloody to the max. Yeah, it's as bloody as Near Dark is. Really.
Oh yeah.
It just isn't as joyous about it necessarily. The joy is contained in a more personal fashion.
Yeah, if you are patient and don't need a lot of don't have a bunch of things to check off to consider something to be a horror movie, it is really worth your time. Mm-hmm. I loved it. Like I say, it's ended up being one of my favorite movies of last year.
And it's a good thing to add to your diet. Just a little bit outside of the normal thing. And I'm sure our audience are sort of omnivores in terms of what they consume. We certainly are. But I think the attitude going into it is not to view it as a Twilight with cannibals, nor
just don't. No.
Yeah.
That is the laziest fucking description imaginable for it. Fucking Variety called it that. Gleiberman called it that. Owen Gleiberman, who should retire.
How he is still employed when so many other much better reviewers have to hustle for a living is beyond.
Not only did he call it Twilight, Twilight with cannibals. He said something about that it was a fashion show, and I'm like, okay. Timothée Chalamet's character, I do not think he changed his outfit the entire movie. I think he has those same.
He's wearing the same fucking pants for the vast majority of it.
For the entire movie. Is that supposed to look cool?
Right. Is that Howdy Doody shirt he wears for 5 minutes supposed to be the pinnacle of fashion? Listen, we save fashion these days for Cronenberg to glower at us in an Yves Saint Laurent coat. Like any second he's about to bemoan at us. I want him soft. he wouldn't be working today if it wasn't for his child, who's made 3 movies. So
we're just throwing out bad takes left and right.
This has now become the bad take section of Kill by Kill.
People are listening to us who aren't on terminally on Twitter, and they're like, "What are you talking about?
What are these terrible ideas you're introducing?" Like, oh, I'm sorry, I'm adjusting them all the time, and now we're just letting you in on our personal back and forth that we're on every single day.
We're adorable teen cannibals, but for bad Twitter takes.
Right. So that pretty much does it. Josh Hollis does all of our artwork. And, of course, Revenge Body does our themes and remixes. Go to RevengeBodyMemphis at Bandcamp.com to get this and all our other theme music. Gina, where can people find you on this here internet?
I write about movies and television at thespool.net. Some of my reviews it'll be up by the time this goes up. I saw and very much enjoyed M. Night Shyamalan's Knock at the Cabin. There's the Shudder upcoming movie Attachment. So look for that. I write about movies and television on my own as well. It's GinaWatchesThings.substack.com. I've been having a lot of fun there. By the time this goes up there, I will have watched and reviewed Brandon Cronenberg's Infinity Pool. So I'm going to put on my tarp so I don't get covered with the blood and semen that's supposedly thrown all over the place in that. And I am on Twitter under Gina Does Things, GENA.
Do it today, people. Check it out. Of course, we are on all of your social media feeds under Kill by Kill Pod or thereabouts. Join us over on our Patreon where we're doing fun things. We're talking about all the Friday the 13th movies and commentaries. And, of course, this month, we will be talking about the final chapter at the end of the month, and in the middle of it, which has just happened, we're talking Alien 3 again, the Radcliffe cut. Yes, if you were missing Gina Radcliffe, who had to bounce out due to technical difficulties, she gets to talk about Alien 3 exclusively for our patrons as I sit back and just wind her up and let her go. That's the plan of this podcast episode we have not recorded yet. Next week, we're back to TV terrors, and we're talking about The Bionic Woman, The Ghost Hunter, which is a very odd 45 minutes of Universal backlot-laden television that contains precious few bionics and even fewer ghosts. It's a real whirlwind, baby. But it is actually a fun episode, so I would suggest you listen to it. But don't worry, folks. The body count will continue for myself and for Gina. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.